Another 4 to 10 inches on the bottom.
All right, I think we'll get started. This is. I think we'll get started. This is the select board workshop on the budget workshop.
You gotta get on the guy with the white hair.
Stop talking over there. Just for a minute, because we have, still people online. So anyway, let's start this workshop. I think, what I would suggest, because it's kind of a basis for going through the budget, is the finance committee could provide, a summary of kind of where they're at and, what you wanted to say for tonight on the capital. Did you have anything you wanted to say, or you just want to go through the budget?
I can quickly comment on the reserve
Yeah,
adjustments since the last time.
that would be helpful, and I think the sheet you sent us, I think is correct, and I actually will hand out.
What's in the draft budget might.
This is a slight.
50,000 move one place to another, I don't know.
It's to be up here. Bottom line is just the allocation.
So speaking of capital reserve accounts, our recommendation is that we attempt to put $805,810 in those accounts. And we talked about that in session 3. Changes that we have made since then is we put an extra, we moved 50,000 additional dollars into the stone wall to make sure there was enough money to move things along with design and etc. We put $50,000 more into the fire department. And that came out of the building and facilities account, the 90/30 account. And we talked last time about the fire department to keep the public safety building project moving forward. Thought they needed a budget of 50,000 for fiscal year 27. The fire department reserve account says vehicles, equipment, and structures. So having it all in the fire department gives them a bigger budget. We all know where it is to work on. Rescue vehicles stayed the same, floats and ramps stayed the same. Paving stayed the same. And the paving number is a big number, it's 240,000. But the plan is to do a project that's slightly over $400,000 in the next 2 years. So with the reserve plus the 240, fiscal year 28, probably need to put in around 80 or 90, which would be a normal annual input, but the money will be there, and we know it's going in a place that needs it in the next couple of years. Public works equipment stayed the same. Oh, well, I think we did talk about it in the last meeting. We had 15,005 that possibly was needed to pay a half year's bond if we bonded South Shore Drive. We decided that we probably wouldn't need a bond in fiscal year 27, but we put that 15,500, I'm sorry, it's 14,000 into the storm damage account.
So 9195.
9195 is 14,000, and that was a half a year's input if and when we bond South Shore Drive. Building and facilities came down to 45,000. But there's currently a balance in building and facilities, the 90/30 account, so that's all the infrastructure. Municipal infrastructure except for the school, capital repairs, capital improvements to that. So that's an account that covers a lot of ground, and it would be roofs, upgrades to systems, septic systems, etc. I think the reserve balance now is around 130. The current plan is to put 45 in there, get you up to about 170. But then additionally, we talked about moving the solar array funds to this account. So there'd be over 200,000 in that account. And as we move forward with capital planning, we need to do a better job of understanding what the long-term bigger expenses are of those facilities. I think I covered it all.
And so what doesn't show up here as there are other projects, capital projects, sort of large potential ones that don't necessarily show up here at the moment. One is the public safety building, so that's not shown as an independent project. South Shore Drive, we haven't covered really with potentially a bond. The Cousins Island Wharf, we hope to have a better idea of what that number would be by next year. And let's see, what else? Mostly those are the two big ticket items. Besides, I would say, even though we're putting away 800,000, the need is 1.2, or, I mean, it's more than what we're actually out putting into reserves right now, if we covered all our capital needs.
I missed your question.
Well, I'm asking sort of like when we talk about just maintaining all the equipment that we have, I mean, we could easily put away another $200,000 and justify it, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Right. So this is not the, gold plate version. This is kind of just getting started on trying to start saving some money.
Yeah, in next year's capital planning cycle,
Right.
Mark Roy recommended that we try to go out 10 or 15 years. And so if we have a training session with all the departments and committees and set that 10 or 15 year target, I think we'll all find out about needs that we haven't even talked about or thought about yet, so.
But for sort of context, in 2024, we budgeted about 400,000, 2025, 550. Last year it was 772. This year it's 805. So we've really ramped it up in the past several years. It's less than a 5% increase from last year to this year, but I do think that we've made a significant effort to try to put money away for these big projects and just general maintenance. Oh, the other thing that, for example, doesn't show up here is the fireboat, we had sort of two presentations on that. I think that is a priority theoretically from the fire department, but I think we haven't included it at the moment. So, and some people may come back and ask us to, I don't know, it's possible. So, and then John, could you just explain where we're at on, I think this group sort of understood that the finance committee is recommending we consider consolidating all these multiple reserve accounts into a smaller number. And we did have a meeting with Mark Roy last week, and you want to just give a recap or short?
Yeah, we had a meeting last week, and he is a proponent of fewer reserve accounts, and it gives you more flexibility. As part of that review, he said the way they should be consolidated in a fashion that a department or a committee is responsible for everything that's consolidated together. Like the fire department's gonna have all their stuff together. And maybe the select board town administrator is gonna have a lot of stuff under a town category for long range planning. At the end of the meeting, he showed us the way he does capital planning with a town that he's been involved with for a while, Greenville. And he developed it, it's an Excel workbook package. It's not all that different than the big beautiful spreadsheet or the dashboard that Andrew has created this year. So a lot of what's in there we have, but it was very understandable and it was a good presentation, and it looked like it could be managed by somebody that was just a moderately good user of Excel.
And originally, I think the thinking was maybe we'd try to consolidate the accounts for this, for the upcoming town meeting. But I think after talking about it and hearing Mark, I think we need a little more work. We need to do a little more work on the structure, the structure that would kind of manage that money. I will say that it's a difference, instead of using a bunch of separate accounts to manage the funds, there's sort of a capital plan, which think of it as it's a spreadsheet that allocates money to different items. And that is sort of what you use for the planning, but he did make it clear that it really requires a certain amount of discipline. And every time you make a change, you got to go back in and revise your plan. And in the past couple of years, we've robbed from the capital accounts. We did it for the heat pumps, fire department did it for the air tanks. So you really, it's a combination of maintaining that in real time, but also, kind of adhering to it, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that would be part of the ongoing role of the finance committee to help document that and keep the structured capital planning process in place.
Yep.
One other thing about consolidation is I think they would recommend that also these new reserve accounts could be paid for bonding. If there was some temporary need for that as you're transitioning, because these things, nobody knows when they're gonna show up. It also, when Carol and Vic have done, go out for grants, it shows a commitment towards just as a stone wharf, there's a lot of money put into that to show commitment, matching funds. There have been some recent cases. Communities have missed out on grants because they didn't have matching funds and weren't willing to do it, so that's another purpose
Yeah,
for.
That's a good point.
Funding. Thanks.
Okay, so I think, what we did on Monday, a couple of us, Chip and John and Vika and I, is went through the budget and sort of tried to figure out, by plugging it into this tax calculation sheet, what the budget that we currently have, what that translates into in terms of a mill rate from compared to last year to this year. And so it is an increase. Did everybody get a copy of the tax calculation sheet? Anybody over there want one? Everybody got one? So Vika, if you want to just quickly walk us through that without getting bogged down in the details. So our current mill rate for the taxes we paid this year is 11.22. So everybody got that? So 11.22 for fiscal year 26.
So when I take this
Yeah.
calculation form, I go into the assessor section of the Trio software that we use. And half of the information is pre-populated based on valuation, personal property, homestead reimbursement and things like that. Those numbers are generated based off the information that the assessor puts in and kind of collectively what we have in our system around about the properties. The information that I input is, if you have the document in front of you, it's really 7 through 13 is where I plug numbers in. So county tax is a number that we receive from Cumberland County. I did have to, it took them some time this year to get their budget finalized, so they were a couple of weeks behind. I had to email them to ask them because I anticipated an increase. I'm glad that I did because we still don't have those bills, but they were able to tell me the number. And it is a 10.23% increase from last year to this year, so we're going from, from one number to a little bit bigger of a number, so that number is provided to us. Municipal appropriation, what that is basically we're taking the entire budget, which is the $4.6 million number, and we're subtracting municipal appropriation and we're subtracting school. And we're coming up with what the municipal cost is going to be. School education is the number directly raised from the school. The anticipated state net revenue, number 12, that is a number that becomes available to all the municipalities in the state early on in the budget process. I go to the main revenue website, I pull up the spreadsheet they have, and it gives me the number that the state is going to provide to the town. And then other revenues, this particular number is generated, so in the trio budget document that you're provided with, the last couple of pages is revenues. So it is generated off of that information, and so for this particular year, if you take all of the revenue that we're anticipated to collect, all of the revenue collectively is $622,303. So that includes,
14,
uh,
right, line 14.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So that includes agent fees, excise tax, building permits, parking tickets, kind of all the things that we predict that we're going to receive. And we subtract the state revenue sharing, and that's the number that we plug in as far as the revenue collected. And then what the system does is it generates a number for number 15, net to be raised by taxes. And then when you look at the rest of the document, that basically gives you a prediction of minimum and maximum mill rate. For line number 19, right in the middle, you will see that it's 0.0121. So right now, we're anticipating the mill rate to be 12.1. How that number gets determined is simply by taking the
I gave them the 12.08 version,
Oh, you
but
did?
sorry about that.
What I do is I was told by a previous tax assessor and our current one who has been trying to separate his ways with us since winter, confirmed it that when you're looking at line number 23, where the overlay is, you're looking at a comfortable number to have that be between about $30,000 and $50,000. We try to aim closer to the $30,000 range. So line item 17 for a minimum tax rate, I start with that number and I plug that number and adjust that number until I see an overlay that is about between $30,000 and $40,000. And then that generates what that mill rate is going to be.
I don't really understand what the overlay is. What is that? What do you?
So overlay is, it's raising money beyond what we're needing to raise to cover the expenses. And where the overlay is used is once we commit to taxes, after we commit to taxes, it is routine. We get a number of people that will commit and they will argue their tax bill. And so the tax assessor goes and reviews, and on a pretty regular basis, we do have a number of what we call abatements, where the municipality, based on either mistakes made or not caught previously to committing, the town owes a credit or a refund to that property owner. That's not anything that we appropriate within the budget process, and so the overlay is what's used to cover those expenses. When it is not expended, the difference goes into undesignated fund.
Okay, and is that sort of a standard percentage that we do sort of year to year?
So there is a requirement of a minimum and a maximum overlay. So if you look on this document, the maximum is nearly $200,000. Our previous tax assessor recommended to me that we try to aim the overlay between $30,000 and $50,000. And our current assessor did confirm that that's a pretty comfortable area. So based on the current information, the overlay is around $37,000. And that is to anticipate any abatements or changes that we would be seeing after committed fiscal year 27 taxes.
So what this means is with a rate that's this close to 30 means that for the most part, the taxes are pretty accurate.
That's-
So it's a low amount for,
The taxes are accurate either way, it just means we're not putting much in reserve for abatements, we're keeping it fairly small based on our history.
Yeah,
But that money, just to be clear, it's not available to the municipality.
correct. It's not, yes.
So we can't use it for anything. It's only available for tax abatements.
By our own convention.
I don't know.
it just doesn't become.
And then the difference that is not used does go into undesignated fund balance.
at the end of the year.
Yes, but it's not, it would have to be kind of a state, town policy or procedure that if you wanted to raise the overlay to use for offset something else, that would be a very specific way.
So for example, this year, do you have an approximate amount going back into the general fund?
For fiscal year 26?
Yeah.
No, because
Is it
it's
just the
too
tax?
hard to predict that at this point, because we're not done yet with the year.
Thank you.
And
Okay,
that's why when it comes to even undesignated fund balance predictions, you're not using the current year numbers, you're using 25 and 27 numbers to kind of predict what you have to work with.
got it.
Just for my identification, on 16, you have this multiplier 1.05, is that a statutory maximum? Or where does that come from? I'm just curious.
So the maximum allowable tax,
Yeah, there's a multiplier that determines that. I was just curious where.
those numbers are all pre-plugged in.
I think the tax assessor in the meeting this week said that that's a state statute.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's a statutory. Okay.
Yeah, so everything in line 60 to 23, I don't even have the ability to move any of those numbers. All I have to work with is to determine the mill rate between the minimum and the maximum allowed. And it's really just kind of fluctuating the number to give you the overlay that you're looking for.
Got it.
And the mill rate to be close enough to previous year that the tax increase isn't going to be significant.
So the bottom line is, this is a tax increase, depends on how you calculate it, I got it close to 8%, right? I mean, it depends on what your divider is, but 7.8% tax increase
That's
approximately.
Yeah.
so
I would say prior years, we've been hovering between like 4 and 5 typically. This is definitely higher than what we've done in the past. I think in our discussions with the finance committee. Well, I'll let you guys, what's your opinion on the, a significantly larger tax increase?
Well, as an individual taxpayer, I don't like it, but, the work that the finance committee did, and knowing everything that's in front of us from a capital standpoint, I wouldn't support reducing the money that we have currently in the budget for capital.
So I think the message there is if we are uncomfortable with that size tax increase, we have to look at the operational, the school and the municipal budget for.
And so with where the budget is now, I looked at the numbers, if you're trying to calculate it and bring it down to about 5%, you're looking at about $100,000 cut. that's gonna be pretty difficult to do in the operational budget. And one point that I want the select board to pay attention to is if you're looking on the fourth budget draft, if you turn to page 37. Historically, so where the increase is on the expense level right now, the increase for the expenses going from fiscal year 26 budget to fiscal year 27 budget is right around 4%, which is not dramatic comparing to the previous years that the town has gone through the budget process. It's even considering how much money is being set aside into reserve accounts, it's fairly consistent. If you look at page 37, when you're looking at 1,300,395, if you look across the board in 2024, 200,000, 2025, 250, 2026, 156. What that is that's select board making a recommendation to pull that much money from undesignated fund balance and put it into revenue to offset the increase. So this year, that's not in it. So if the town had and was using $100,000 to $200,000 of undesignated fund to offset the revenue and making the revenue from the 600, from the 582 number to a higher number by using undesignated fund, your tax increase would be lower. But that's was not recommended this year, and the first and now soon to be second special town meeting has basically wiped out most of the undesignated fund balance to cover costs for some of those costs that were voted on or that are being voted on. So I think big thing to keep in mind is, well, yes, the proposed tax increase is higher than what it's been. Realistically, it's not higher than it's been because in the past, the undesignated fund has played a significant contribution to bringing that final number down to appear as though the taxes are, or the, the expenses are going up to the same level that they have.
So we've steadily been decreasing undesignated fund balance over time to offset.
So the last couple of years, they've been added at a pretty higher rate than it had been, before. It's fluctuated anywhere between 50 and 75,000 to 250.
And I think in recognition of these bigger projects, that's why we were putting it away. What we didn't have is sort of all the other capital needs kind of, inventoried. And so that number is also pretty large. And so I think the combination of the two, and I think what you're referring to is that overall, the municipal budget expense line went up by approximately 4.5%.
Yeah.
And, but our overall tax rate increase is 7.8. And there is a slight increase just directly in capital, about 35,000 that we've applied to capital more than last year. So that's gonna bump it up. And then beyond that, I think when we look through the budget, there's a pretty significant increase in the fire department budget. I think it's 10%. Is that right?
For departmental budgets, that is the biggest increase for new expenses. If you look at all of the departments, you will see that the marine infrastructure was previously harbor master. The perception looks like it's going up significantly, but a lot of that is reallocated funds that were in public works and putting it into the newly restated marine infrastructure. So it's not seeing new expense increase. It's just because of the reallocation and having those funds in that department for the first time. It looks like it's going up significantly more.
So I guess I'm gonna leave it open for questions now on kind of where people are at. First of all, if you have any questions about the tax rate calculation or thoughts on that, any questions about capital recommendations, or, you know, if you want to make any suggestions on modifying the budget. And, most of the increases that, you know, are noted in the actual, you know, significant changes have been noted in the budget itself. So,
The one big change that is from draft 3 to draft 4 that has not been presented to you is in the assessor department. There is an additional $10,000 that has been added in there under contracted services. And that is as a result of having a conversation with the tax assessor. As you might be aware, we had, an RFP out at the beginning of the year for reevaluation services. We did not have a single bite on that. I did recently send out to every contact on the state website looking for any interest. We still haven't received any. And so what the assessor has recommended is similar to the process that the town engaged with Mark Roy, is to hire somebody that will come to the island and visit every property on the island and adjust every property based on how each property is adjusted. So going from property to property and determining, you know, you have a shed that's not taxed and so forth, and have that properly be adjusted into the system. So then hopefully by the time we do get to a reeval process, the system is more cleaned up, but in the meantime, we have some work that has taken place to help us get to a better kind of more in line process. And he is currently doing a reeval, and he's working with an individual that is showing some interest in doing just that for this municipality. And so that $10,000 addition in there is to be able to have the funds to, what he recommended is about $50 per property. We have nearly 500 parcels. And so that addition is basically assuming that in fiscal year 27, an individual can cover 200 properties and be able to properly assess those properties. So that's the big significant increase per dollar from last draft to this draft that
well,
was
and
not
also
included.
the tax relief program.
And then, yes, the tax relief program is.
So there's a new department, 1410, which is being proposed by the finance committee for a tax relief program with an allocation in this budget for 20,000. So that's something we're gonna talk about, so we can cover that and that amount when we get there.
So this person is gonna be contracted to evaluate these properties is not an assessor?
They are, and they're, I still have to engage in more conversations, but, what the current assessor recommended is, try to find somebody who would be willing on their time, who is a qualified assessor, come to the island and visit each property.
Mhm.
And take the cards and what we have in our system, bring it with them and go property by property and make sure that's what's in the system is connected to what is on the property taxes cards and make the appropriate connections. And that ultimately should have ideally, most likely, a positive impact to our valuation number going up, making taxation a little bit more even and in line with kind of fairness.
I guess what I'm not understanding is we put out an RFP for an assessor to do the same work and there was no takers. And so now we're somehow finding an assessor who's going to come.
So I think the difference is, if I understood him correctly, is this task is to update the individual
records.
property information, like, you know, did somebody have an addition 20 by 40? You know, do they have a shed, a garage? So it's not a revaluation, it's merely bringing all the data up to speed, so the reevaluation would be quicker, cheaper. I will say the town,
It's a portion of what the
It's a-
assessor normally do.
and it's kind of the grunt work, the time consuming work.
Okay.
And he did say ideally it should be an assessor. I will tell you, the town of Long Island did it themselves with a community member and a fellow. And that's how they did it. So they went around and did the properties, then they hired a certified assessor to analyze that data. That was Mark Green.
The finance committee just. The fellow had to leave town.
Protection program.
But I think we probably do have a number of, I mean, it's not uncommon for people to do things that don't make it onto their tax cards. But one thing he did say is that particularly there was kind of a gap, not a shocker, say in 22 to 24, where there isn't good records of what building occurred. Since the current code enforcement officer has been keeping good records. And so that he was sort of making the point that that's important because it translates into revenue for the town, not just for the building permit, but for the ultimate taxation. So kind of, that's another reason it's important to have a functional code officer.
And so in fact, it just means that everybody's tax bill is accurate to what they should be paying taxes on, but when is the last time that was completed? And is it,
2016 is the last time we had a reeval.
so then,
But that's not, what we're talking about is not a revow, it's
Right.
just correcting the
The
basic
tax.
It's
information on
like
the
cleaning up the
property.
books.
Yeah,
Or updating them.
for the revow,
I mean,
which sets the stage, is that correct?
yeah.
Yeah, what I asked him to do is I asked him to pull up my tax card and go through kind of when he talks about grading scales and things like that. Knowing my house and knowing the process that we went through, I wanted to kind of visually see what I could compare it to. And when he pulled up my information, while all the information was accurate, it still had a picture of my old house. And we've had the new house for 3 years. It took us 9 months for it to build. So that's just a minuscule example of the inaccuracies that are there. And he really made the point that, you know, the properties that likely not only just not having everything updated based on the work that has been done, and when we had issues with a code enforcement officer, where there's gonna be some changes are in those properties that no one has come to the code enforcement officer in a long time, or the land values, you know, somebody that owns 10 acres that they've owned for 30 years. Those changes haven't been assessed, and so having somebody kind of go through and figure out the parcels where there are buildings and get that all corrected and accurate in line to, you know, leading up to the reeval. If we're struggling finding somebody to do a reeval now, this is a good way to kind of start the process and get things moving and hopefully put us in a similar position with what we're trying to do with the accounting, you know, get things cleaned up and hope that in the future will look more appealing for an auditor.
So theoretically, you could just hire an appraiser, like the one that does appraisals for real estate stuff, who has all the same skill set of how many square feet are here, how many bathrooms, how many this, how many that. You could use somebody like that might be cheaper than an assessor, I don't know for sure, but there's a lot more of them around than there is probably.
I think he recommended that they be an assessor, I think that does kind of,
I think with the
credibility.
Trio software system that we use, there is a limited. You really need to be within the municipality work and be an assessor to know how to work that system. So I think having an understanding of how in the world is one thing, but then how to apply it when you're using that software system is another component. I think more or less a more important component, because even when he was describing some of the grading scales.
Yeah.
Those have a direct impact, and knowing how to use that software system is really important.
Vicky, you used the term card, and then the Trio software, when they get the information on the card, then it goes into the Trio software.
So they input the information into Trio software, and then they can generate what we reference to as a tax card with all the information on it.
Mark?
Would you let me up there?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm with John Moran, I'm not tickled about this proposed increase, but I will say, being at almost every meeting, I see why we got where we're at. So am I correct right now in saying that you're proposing, or we're looking at an 88 cent increase in the mill rate? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So just for example, am I correct in saying if a property is valued at $500,000 with dwelling and land, that their increase would be $400 to $500, and if it's $1 million, it would be $800 to $900?
Yep.
My next question is, does this include the school budget?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the superintendent sent me the school budget this week ahead of their meeting last night, and so. I incorporated every line item from that budget. Their budget actually, from the first time the select board saw the school budget to what was provided, did go down a little bit, and their revenue did increase. And so those numbers are incorporated in this information. And my understanding is the school did vote on their budget last night to finalize it, so the numbers in here should reflect school's finals numbers.
And I thought our increase last year was almost 6%, am I wrong?
At the start of, or at this stage in the game, that the increase was close to 8, the select board asked me to drop it down to 5. We ended up cutting in the capital recommendations to bring it closer to 5%. So it ended up being about, I think it was like 5.4, 5.5-ish, not quite at 6, but closer to 5.
So that was with 150,000 from the undesignated fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Well, you're not as cheap as the old select, because you're doing a good job.
Well, you
They
say,
have a lot more big projects that I think they're having to squeeze in.
well, but I think that the challenge is everybody in this room has sort of been following the process, but I have a sense that, you know, once this hits the streets, it might not be met with so much, pleasure. And so I think we have a job to do, that if we are going to adopt, a 7.8% increase, that we have to educate the public as to why.
have to sell it.
That's, excuse me, but the one big piece, I think that I'm still on the learning curve for understanding all of this, but after 2 years and understanding how difficult it is to make all of these best decisions, getting this communicated to the public so they understand so many things that go into this increase in the budget, and understanding that it really is because of multiple factors, but the budget itself hasn't gone up 8%. We're really looking at putting more money into those big projects we need. I think that if we were to look at an increase of this magnitude, making sure that there's a really good PR way to present it to the public, front loading, saying this is where things are going. We're on such good footing now with the recommendations of the finance committee and understanding all of these big ticket projects that really just need to get moved to the finish line. I would hope that people are understanding once they see beyond the numbers. So there's the sticker shock, but understanding what they're getting beyond that sticker shock, that we're really investing in all these infrastructure projects that we need to, and in a diverse way. Like there isn't anything in this increase that doesn't have direct benefits now and in the future to all of our citizens. Everything from the stone wharf. Well, I'm a little worried about not having the Cousins Island Wharf on there. But, you know, not feeling like that's solid enough, but I just wanna say it's with the right crafted information for the public, I think that we can have people be more appreciative of the work that's been done.
We have to get up at the beginning of the town meeting and say that.
It's gonna be long before the town meeting.
But that's,
David,
Along those lines,
everybody's there.
along those lines, I think it would be very helpful to put together, basically a list of all of the items that we don't really, hadn't really expected, or like the stone wharf, like, all the work that we're doing that we really didn't really plan to be doing this year. Put together that list and what that effect is on the tax rate versus what it would be if we didn't have those things. Not to say that that it's an either or thing, but just to say, this is what we're doing. And this is where it would be if we didn't have to.
right, so to that end, I think, you know, we will have a budget meeting in mid-May, a public meeting. It's pretty much a done deal by then.
Yeah.
But I do think that we had talked about an infrastructure meeting, but I think it's kind of morphed into a mailing to the community, to the public, that explains, first of all, what the finance committee has been doing, you know, what progress they've made, looking at the bigger picture, and then updates on, in particular, some of the big projects like Stone Wharf, South Shore Drive, that kind of thing. And I do think, you know, kind of setting, one of the things is though people will be experiencing this increase without experiencing any immediate improvements.
Right.
And so there might be some dissatisfaction with that. So explaining to people that it's imminent, that these things will happen, we can do our best. But that's kind of the PR game plan. And I originally was thinking after the budget meeting, we could send this out, but maybe it makes more sense to send it before the budget meeting. That way, if people are not happy, we hear about it at the budget meeting. I think the goal of all of us is we don't hear about it on June 6th at town meeting, because that's not a good time to get feedback. So, and you know, I don't know what to expect. I think also we don't wanna, you know, exaggerate. We don't want to rile people up ourselves because it's a bigger increase. I think we just need to be cool, calm and collected and say it's what's necessary. So anyway, John, you've been standing there for a few minutes, so.
It's okay. One thing we presented at a couple of, finance committee presentations was the change in Chubbuck taxes versus Yarmouth
Well,
and Cumberland, and also change in Chubbuck taxes versus inflation. So we can show that.
Those are helpful.
Just an education on this sheet again. So the top line is the assessed value of the real estate, 331 million. Okay, that hasn't changed since
2016.
2024. No, 2016 was the last time a complete revaluation was done. The assessors they add property, et cetera, over time, but that number hasn't changed for 2 years. Now, the assessor that no longer works for us, feels mad and he comes in and he's still working. He said he thought that would go up by about 3 million this year. So that, I don't wanna count that in the equation. Yeah.
To do it.
When the calculation is done, hopefully that number will be at least 334 million.
Will that, so I'm sorry, will that impact?
It will
Yes, 'cause
lower,
that's the denominator that calculates the
So
village.
that's like the new construction and that's.
so that will lower the tax rates some, it could by
he
a,
said that there might be about a
Could
half
happen.
a percent difference is what he told me.
Right.
So it's him putting, so any work that has been done, he usually goes in after April 1st and puts that in, but before the commitment to taxes. So cause I asked him that point blank, we're trying to predict the mill rate right now, knowing that any new construction that would ultimately have a direct impact on that valuation number hasn't been input, so can you throw us a bone, help us figure out, you know, how that could impact? And he said that you could see maybe about 0.5% of a difference, so it will work in town's benefit, so when the taxes are committed, the tax rate might be a little bit less, but you can't assume that that information and that input is gonna bring us to a, you know, a 3% decrease.
No, I said it mostly for education,
Right.
that number hasn't changed and it's important.
It did change from Tuesday to Wednesday because he adjusted it and it actually went down by a little bit.
Can I just ask one more clarifying question? So this document gives us the 7.8% increase. Right. At what point does that become solid? If some of these numbers are still fluid, is it by town meeting?
No, it's what, July?
So the select board needs to approve and finalize that the numbers and this entire draft budget,
Right.
you're okay.
Yeah.
And then, the numbers on this sheet between 7 and 13 comes from the municipality.
Okay,
The valuation and ultimately how much that changes is what's gonna have the bottom number as to what gets committed for taxes.
thank you.
So we can predict as best as we can now, but the taxes don't get committed until August.
Yeah.
So that's when we'll have the exact number. It has been, if you look at this prediction last year to what the taxes commitment was, it is the same number. So we've prayed a pretty good accuracy in that, for the most part.
But if a warrant article is not approved that has money attached to it, that would change the tax rate in the end. And certainly,
Yeah.
we have not experienced
Yeah.
that much, but plenty of towns have.
Yeah.
That's not a very uncommon thing.
Well, that's why we need to.
I mean, the
be so
voters can
effective at
choose
promoting.
not to adopt, you know, admin department at
Right,
$377,000 and then everything that you're planning on, you know, covering for expenses, you can't.
Right.
And then that, yeah, so
okay,
hence why it's important, I think, to educate people ahead of the town meeting, so they're not all flustered at town meeting and are raising these questions.
So if we were to get something into the island calendar by April 20th.
Well, I think, yeah, I think it would be a separate mailing really, because
Separate.
it's really should come from the town and it should be budget related. I don't think we might send sort of a summary of the budget, but not all the detail we're looking at here. But I think it's gonna take some time to put that together. I think part of it is to the prelude being all the work the finance committee has done. You know, I think we're being responsible citizens trying to plan for the future, and so I think that's gonna be important. And then I think the other part that's gonna be important is to give people some confidence that something's gonna improve at some piece of infrastructure in their lifetime. And I'm thinking we can get there. And it didn't hurt that we raked in $1 million. You know, we have, you know, we got $1 million almost in FEMA money and we got $1 million in a earmark. So that, it's not like we're not trying to fill the gap. So I think that's, and if we didn't have that, taxes would be, you know, potentially even higher.
Well,
They all meet the notice.
yeah, well, the other thing was really good when Mark Roy was in that meeting, was talking about, you know, failure to kind of plan for the 10 years out or whatever results in these really significant spikes in taxes and expenses that we don't want to have that happen. Nobody wants that to happen. So part of this, you know, this increase is to make sure we're keeping it within reason and we're not going up 12% or worse in a given tax year.
So I was on the back of the boat, which these days is like, you have to have an elevator speech. Well, it's your back of the boat speech. Somebody came up and said,
Yeah.
how much you gotta raise our taxes?
Yeah.
And knowing that I had about 12 minutes left, I had to come up with some ideas. And it's simply three things that I think of. One is that we have a fairly small base. So when we have to buy a fire truck, it costs you more than it does somebody from Yarmouth. And something like a backhoe, suddenly that came up $150,000. that's a lot of money, but with a small tax base, that has a bigger impact on the bottom line. The other thing is because we're an island, Vicky's tired of hearing me say, we live on an island. But all of the island coming and going, the wharf and its cove. If you think about all these capital projects, it's because of the coming and going to the island. That's number two. Number three is climate change. There's a fairly substantial, is getting eaten up, so they kind of all fall into those three things.
And I think we're unusual as a town in that the school has been protected. And there's a very significant commitment, or has been, from most of the towns where things get hot is the school budget. And several school budgets have been turned down this spring. And so on Long Island, their meeting is in a couple weeks and they are debating to keep their school open. Because it's a lot of money for 2 children, so that's kind of where they're at. So I do think the school's been pretty insulated from what other towns have experienced. And I think there's been a community commitment. They've made, they've had an initiative to bring in tuition students, to try to keep the numbers at a reasonable, I think they've made a real attempt to keep the school sustainable. But I just wanted, most of the towns, that's where the conflicts arise. And I remember being at a MSAB 51 budget meeting when it was voted down multiple times. And so, I don't think the school budget will come under fire, but it could. And so that's the other side of the equation.
Well, it'd be important to show all the work they've done to actually keep it under control.
Yeah, so they
It's gone down
can,
in some cases.
they would have a portion of this mailing to sort of describe what they're doing.
And
So,
we've always, some good news is we started to do some modeling in the future when you look out at 10 years. And these can be managed. What we see on the plate now can be managed, can be staged so that it can be fiscally responsible. And it doesn't go on forever in terms of, these things that they're building now will last a long time.
so I think, oh, go ahead, Vern. I think before we go too far, it would be good to go over the tax relief proposal. Is that something you want to talk about tonight?
It's in the budget, so.
Yeah, so I think we
So
should,
you should decide whether you want to leave it in, adjust
Right,
it, or
right, so
whatever.
after Herb's done, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think this will be quick. So I'm looking at the new marine infrastructure
What page?
and the transitions, page
Yeah.
10 and page 12. 12 is public services. And Vicky did a good job explaining. Just the one line item, contract services. Line 5,000 in each of those categories. So I think what you did was there was 17,000 budgeted last year, so you put 14,000 in the new page 10 and left 3,000 in the public service.
3,000 was historically in there for contracted services before, prior to marine infrastructure related. So I just pulled directly what had been placed in there last year for,
And that's kind of the question, I'm curious what they use that for.
oh God, you're putting me on the spot. I'd have to pull up the vendor report to look at it.
Okay,
Probably like the back.
In the past, it was contracted services related around if they had to hire somebody else to do some work around equipment.
yeah, we used to hire somebody to do the mowing on the roads, but we don't do that anymore.
There, yeah, that was removed a couple of years ago. I'd have to pull up the report to.
It's not a big number, I just want to make sure I understood, where that 14,000 came from, what the rationale was, and that. And that there really was some still. We'll be reporting on the marine infrastructure changes, if the water's been, so I just want to make sure I have background.
Yeah, and we did, so we asked Zach Pettit for an updated quote, just to make sure that after doing it once, that he didn't wanna double the cost. And so this number does reflect what he told us to anticipate for, you know, next fiscal year for costs.
And it is a little more, right? It was like 10 really, is what we,
It was, what was
You're-
not budgeted last year was the,
Boatyard.
the boatyard transport costs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and now, I mean, that wasn't significant, compared to what it could have been.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Or we asked we're just kind of free for all, right? So the food service salary, that went up like
This is in the schools.
in the school.
Yep.
Can you refresh my memory why that went up? Like,
I don't know why, there are a couple of those that went up, the school food service salary went up to.
went to
about-
31,860 from 1673.
Right.
I cannot comfortably speak to anything when it comes to the school budget.
So I think if we have questions about the school budget, we could compile them and email them to Aaron and he could answer them for us, because the next time we meet is really the budget presentation. But, the school is rolling off their debt completely.
Right.
So last I looked and I haven't, because we just got this last night. I haven't had a chance to really look at it, but when the previous version, the operational budget was actually increasing, even though the budget overall was decreasing, because when you take the debt service out, it was actually going up. So,
That is accurate. Their expense is, increasing. It's around like $43,000
That
in
sounds
total that the expense department is increasing.
so I think what would be good is if you have questions about this, and I have some, so I think what we should do is compile our questions. I can send them to Aaron, copy the entire board. That way it's not coming from any one person, and then he could respond to
Okay.
us. Cause I have a couple myself, so does anybody, you could just email them to me and maybe if you can get them in, we could send them by Friday or something. Does that seem reasonable? And I had the same question about the staffing, and actually the budget that's easier to follow is the one that he sent separately. And that's in
There were two attachments in your email. One was an Excel document, and that's what came directly from the superintendent. And then another one I exported out of Trio, just the school department numbers. Just because when you have the full export, it's hard to know what the numbers were. And so there's a couple of copies here too. You could see with in your email, and then here on the last page, it does show you the expense. So fiscal year 26 is 1.178, fiscal year 27 is 1.219, so it's a 3.5% increase. With the debt dropping down.
And it's this format that Aaron sent, Shabik Island School Budget fiscal year 27, and I think it's a little bit easier to see the changes in this format. And then he has a summary of it. And so I do think I had some questions. I mean, it's a pretty generous budget, particularly the staffing, and he did send a separate summary of all the staffing. So it's, it's a lot of people for how many children? 24.
23.
Yeah, and it's about a 50-50 mix right now between tuition and island students, but I would say compared to Cliff Island or Long Island, we're in much, we have at least a viable school system, so.
I know one thing that they did intentionally do is when they were adding students, they were doing it at a rate that wouldn't require them to add additional staffing.
Right.
And then also they have been lucky enough that they've had a good enough interest from folks from the mainland that they have been able to selectively pick and fill the gap. So if they needed a 6-year-old boy who was surrounded by 6-year-old girls, they've been able to incorporate the students into the school system in a way that it benefited the students that lived on Chebec.
Listen, no doubt the improvements with recruiting students from the mainland has made our school population more robust and more sustainable when, if we were trying to operate it with just 12 kids, it would feel very skeletal. So I think it's a real benefit to our students. It's a bit of a misnomer, I think, that it doesn't cost the school board to add 12 students because there are other costs. But I want to say that a good school is a robust community. And I think that it's, I don't know, when I looked at how much the school debt was retired and added to that, the fact that the tuition being paid to the town of Yarmouth is decreasing, I can see that there, I just was wondering if there were many ways that that could be looked at, but, there you have it.
Well, I would mention though, the renovation debt is in the municipal debt service. So the building renovation, the school building, for whatever reason, that's been incorporated on the municipal side.
Okay.
So Mark, you have something?
I'll be very quick, and this is, I apologize. Part of this is thinking ahead for the next 1 to 5 years of
Yep.
budgeting. In this current budget, there is no recommendation to increase debt service.
Right.
So we're not increasing our debt service portion of we're not recommending to increase that right now. In about 1.5 years, we're going to retire about probably $2.5 million worth of existing debt from Trumbull. Bad news is we're going to have to borrow some money.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be interesting to me moving forward to see how we craft a budget with likely increasing bonding at around $70,000 a year payment for every $1 million that you borrow in a 20-year term. And handle our departmental and reserve fund action.
Yep, it's a very good point, and I think already this year, if you look at it collectively, the school is retiring their debt, they'll be done. And then we roll off,
It rolled in. This budget is $458,000. In fiscal year 29, it'll be 253,000, so it's $200,000 gets retired in fiscal year 29. And it actually goes down 100,000 in 28, and then another 100,000 in
and that's about when
29.
we'll be adding that we expect to need to add
Right.
debt service, so.
That's my point, yeah.
Can you speak to the 59,000 and change that is being put into reserve with the assumption that, so the money that in the last draft budget, we put under debt, that now moved into reserve, and then I think that might lead into the select board determining whether change in the language on the warrant articles or the descriptions would warrant a future change. Cause I think that, well, there isn't a bond being taken out this year, there is some small portion being aside with the idea that that's coming in the near future.
Yeah, and to do that, the reserve accounts definitions need to be changed to say that those funds can be used for debt service. And we're not doing that fiscal year 27, but might need to do that in fiscal year 28. Again, that's a flexibility thing, bigger reserves and some debt service.
I think it would be good for the select board to see the presentation that Mark did where he shows how small, comparatively, things that pop up unexpectedly don't necessarily cause a big problem when you have a long time horizon and you're saving, adequately for that time horizon. That was a surprise to me, and I can't explain it well, but I think it would be worth, if we do some kind of capital planning workshop, it would be good to have him go through that, because that was very informative to me about how a $50,000 backhoe blip is not gonna even show up practically. So, anyway, I think that would be, it's capital planning is not, to me, sort of intuitive necessarily, so I think it would be good to have him explain that, because I think for the town and the select board, that's where a lot of our, impact is gonna be is on the capital side. So, and every grant we get helps to reduce that burden, so that's the other thing. So I think we could move on to the proposal on the tax relief program. I think I gave you guys a copy, Mark and Ferb a copy, but everybody should have got a copy in their email. So, and yeah.
So did everybody read this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I believe that the select board said you wanted the finance committee to look at this. Towns, other towns have it. The state has a property tax fairness credit. And if you read the introductory language to that, it says for tax and rent relief for low to moderate income residents. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. And to keep it simple, for start, this says that to qualify for the Shabig program, you would have to qualify for the state program. So we use the same eligibility criteria. And we put a couple of additional restrictions in there, like if you're a property owner, you have to qualify for the state program, but you also have to be signed up for the homestead exemption. You know, if we're giving you tax relief, we wanna make sure you take it all, and you need it, we wanna make sure you take all the, apply for everything you can. The amount of the state credit varies based on your filing status, from individual to married filing jointly, and then how many dependents you have. The maximum state credit is $4,000. This proposal says $2,000 per dwelling unit. The state requires, if you're married, that you file a joint return, so that if one person's got high income, the other one's got low, they qualify for credit. Ease of administration, so they'd come to the town office, and they fill out, they turn in a form, might be online, but they get a form, turn it in. The tax assessor can contact Maine Revenue Service, and Maine Revenue Service will tell a municipality that that taxpayer qualified for the state property tax fairness credit. So we're trying to keep it simple. You would apply by, let's say, May 15th. Every year, but you have to apply every year, you apply by May 15th. You get your credit if you are approved shortly after, before the end of the fiscal year. Okay, it's just like taxes. You file in the spring for the previous tax year, you'd be filing in this application. Let's say if this were approved, you in March, April, May of 28, you'd be filing based on 27, and you get your credit. Okay, if you owe taxes and you qualify for credit, it would be applied to your tax bill. Okay, if you don't, if you paid your taxes, the town would issue a check. It requires an ordinance.
Excuse me, but not if someone is in arrears.
That's what he said.
Is that, I mean, what if somebody owes more than 1 year?
Then the money would go to whatever they owe for taxes.
Okay, thank you.
The state ordinance or the state law says that municipalities must have an ordinance to do this. So we had some discussion about what's the process to create an ordinance, and do we have time to do that for fiscal year 27? I don't know whether you got anything from the town attorney or not on that.
So to answer the question is, no, we don't have time to bring an ordinance to the June town meeting. But I did ask the town attorney about the process of this. One question that was raised is, right now, there's the $20,000 being proposed in this budget ahead of having an ordinance established. And so, the town attorney, what he said was that, well, it's less preferred option, in his opinion. It is possible for the town, and the town has the ability to go to the voters at the June meeting and say, do you approve this $20,000 for a tax relief, program? But, he would want to make sure that there is very specific stipulation in there to say that upon a town meeting approval of a proper ordinance and so forth and so forth. And then the town would not be able to use those funds until that happens. What he said his preferred method and what he would recommend is that we do both of these things in line with one another. Is, when the town is ready to have the ordinance established. At that point, the town go to, town meeting, ask for the ordinance to establish in one warrant article, subsequent warrant article, ask for the appropriation of the funds. And so the place where those funds could come from would be either to raise by taxes, which if we're already in the middle of a tax year and we're having a special town meeting, the assessor would have to recommit the taxes, which I would highly advise. Or you would ask for that $20,000 to come out of the undesignated fund balance, so.
That makes
Any
sense.
questions?
Yeah, so a couple questions. A lot of towns limit this to sort of elders or senior citizens, and they have an age criteria. And then the other thing is this, so this is age agnostic. The other thing that,
Is it what?
well, there's no age limitation for this.
Right,
But what I don't understand is the state of Maine property tax fairness credit would only apply to somebody who's a property owner and being taxed. So how does a renter? So
Maine property tax fairness credit is owners and renters.
so how do renters qualify?
I assume they have to have a certificate from their landlord that they file with their state tax return. I don't know, but they do qualify.
I guess that's one thing I'd wanna understand, because I'm not sure, we
See,
don't.
the theory is a renter is actually paying the real estate tax.
Right, I get it, but given the not huge number of renters we have here, I would be sort of inclined to keep it simple. I have not seen, I looked through a bunch of ordinance, haven't seen any other town that's including renters. Maybe there are, but I didn't find any. But,
I think Portland might, but I'll have to go back and look.
right, so I guess, but the other thing is why, what's the philosophy? I thought,
So the philosophy that finance committee discussed a few times, but not in great depth, was in our original comprehensive plan, we want to be a community with a diverse age population and young families that can work and live here, put kids in the school. So trying to reduce the burden for younger starting people.
okay.
But the tax credit is, for the state, is against, offered as against or applied against their income tax, correct?
Right, but it's a refundable credit.
Right.
If you could owe no income tax.
Right.
And not need to file a tax return and get the credit.
Okay, but in any case, it's applied to their income tax, whereas we're applying it to property tax, correct? So it doesn't make sense to have renters included in this.
That's why I'm a little, but you're saying that they are, so what John is saying, and I wasn't aware of this, is that in the state program, a renter could apply if they can somehow verify their inordinate tax burden through their rent, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure. I guess I'd want to know a little bit more about that. And because what most of the towns around us are doing, and I'm not saying we have to be the same, is, looking more to provide tax relief for people on fixed incomes, 65 and older, 62 and older, some, I think Cumberland 70 and older. So that's the target population. I get that we might have different objectives in terms of also providing relief for the younger population. But yeah, I guess I want to know a little bit more about how the main revenue service program works before, because I just can't visualize how you get relief if you're a renter, but I believe you.
Okay, I can email you all a quick
Yeah,
printout from the main revenue service. Right up on the property tax fairness credit, which is
And in fact,
for
we have.
taxpayers and renters.
We have so few year-round renters that could potentially be eligible. The other thing is, what we would hope is if someone is on the island and renting, we would hope that would be part of getting a foothold in the community and moving into home ownership. I think we often see that happening with especially young renters.
I guess I'm thinking about, really having a good story to sell this program, and I'm a little concerned. I guess I'm on the same wavelength as the town attorney. I think the ordinance, which would describe kind of the controls of how the program's being implemented, would work. I mean, I think it would work best to have them happen together, because I can picture a lot of questions if we appropriate money without an ordinance.
Oh, I agree totally. I would want to see what's in the ordinance, because there's a law that applies. Like, one of the things that we've kicked around is the payment has to be proportionate to income levels. Well, what does that mean?
But
You
isn't
know,
that,
it's,
isn't that determined in part by what's happening at this, with the state level?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of basing this upon that is being. able to
theoretically,
use
but
that.
then different towns do it different ways. They have graduated amounts and they have fixed amounts, so. That is where an attorney would need to say this complies with the law related to proportional payment.
I am fully.
To tell me that he hopes he gets to see this ordinance before it goes Ben,
Yeah.
which I did tell him that he will review it before it goes to a town meeting.
But I'm fully in favor of this program. I'm on, I would want to really understand the rent part, because I just can't quite picture it, but it's just me getting educated. I think it would have a greater chance of success and be subject to less pushback if it was done with the ordinance at the same time. I mean, I just think in terms of success, so my recommendation is we hold off and try to do these simultaneously. I also think, it might be, I don't know. So we're saying the state has a $4,000 credit max approximately. We would have two, and we're estimating kind of that might take, you might have 10 households that would,
We have no idea.
Because I wonder if.
It could be $500
Right.
per person, and the
Right.
budget could be $5,000 to
Right.
start.
Well, and I think I think this is a good idea. I just feel like we need the ordinance and the allocation to happen simultaneously at town meeting, because otherwise I picture John Rent getting up saying, I have no objection to this program, but what are the rules?
Right,
And without the rules, I don't think people are gonna feel, and I personally, as a select board member, even though I can kind of see it in draft here, I'm just not comfortable at this point.
Yeah, and I just struggle with the renter part of it. I mean, I don't see how the town should be in a position to providing tax relief to a renter who's not paying property tax, which is part of our budget issues, but we're basically gonna write them a check. So they can help pay their income tax or whatever. Some tax that doesn't have anything to do with our town. But to me, that makes no sense.
Right, so for me, I am kind of on the fence about the rent thing, but I guess I'd have to look at the property tax. thing.
I think it's more easily sold if you're restricted to older people.
Right.
And it's strictly, tax relief, real estate tax relief.
Real estate, right?
I agree,
I mean,
that's my.
this is a draft, we talked,
Right.
that they came to the table late, so.
Move into housing.
Well, I certainly understand the complication about including renters in this. It's such a insignificant, I think, percentage of our community are year-round renters. In the town of Cumberland, they've got plenty of families. The challenge for the town of Cumberland is being able to maintain their older citizens. We have the opposite issue. We want to be able to encourage younger people coming here, and when we look at the cost of ownership right now, it's an incredible burden. I like the idea of having it be all ages, not just with an age cutoff. I think that for me, that sends an important message that if there's a young owner looking at purchasing a property, understanding they could get some property relief with a lower income, that can make a difference for home ownership. So I want to speak up on behalf of keeping it be not age restricted. We've got to, even though our heart is in it for what happens with older people with incomes that are not able to meet their taxes. So I think all ages.
I understand what you're saying. I think as a community, to sell this to the community initially, I think it would be better, like most communities have, to have it be age restricted, targeted to the older property owners who do get squeezed out of communities because they're on a fixed income and their tax rates are escalating. So that, and I think there could be other programs designed to, deal, including, housing programs to help younger people. I think it's really older people that, and some towns require a fairly lengthy residency before you can even qualify. Like you might have to be there, have been there a decade. And so I think it's really meant to help long-term residents stay in their communities and not have to eat cat food for supper. And so I think for me, sort of incorporating the younger group, I really have to think about it. I'm not sure this is a good mechanism. I'm not sure it's effective in kind of, helping that group, particularly the rent portion. So bottom line is I think it deserves more discussion in, amongst us. David?
If it were available to everybody, would that not dilute the amount per family?
Per household.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, potentially would, if
So that's not gonna help people as much if it's for everybody.
right.
Right, and for
Per
people,
household,
it's only for people who are eligible.
I understand, but if you make it available to everybody, it's gonna dilute the amount of help that's available.
So I think it would be helpful if the town attorney could give us a draft ordinance where we had to fill in the important parameters.
Well, I think we need to first decide what it, are we going with a tax and rent credit program or something different? And I think we should maybe decide, will it be age restricted? I don't, there are some ordinances right
If you
here.
guys wanna decide that, then tell us, that's.
Well, I don't think it's up to us to decide. I think that's what so there might be a public meeting, maybe not a public hearing. So what I'm suggesting, I would first have a public kind of informational meeting. This is what, that could be really anytime. This is what we're thinking of doing. Here are some different options. Providing people with some background, here's what the state already does. I think it needs to be kind of an information session so people like ourselves, because even we don't know.
Maybe a survey.
It could be a survey, but I do think
Just
some
for
kind of
surveys.
information needs to go out to the community to help the decision-making process. Then we draft an ordinance and then there's a public hearing. We take that input and modify the ordinance as we see fit. And, and I guess the finance committee would be tasked with that. So it's probably a multi-month process, but I think what I would recommend is in this mailing that goes out is, we're working on a tax relief program. We're pretty close to coming out with some recommendation and, describing what the next step might be, which I think could be like a public meeting or it could be a mailing. It doesn't have to be a meeting. Maybe it's something online that people can read and then have a public hearing. But I think sometimes we forget or we think of these public hearings as like, okay, we got to do it before the town meeting so we can fit it in there. But the point is to get feedback and perhaps come back with a revised draft of the ordinance. And this one, I think, it would be good to maybe do it during the summertime so that we could, have a larger portion of the community involved. I don't know.
I think that's a difficult time because it's only open to residents.
But I mean, it's, they're paying taxes. Yeah.
So I'm assuming you're going to take the $20,000 out of the budget for now and maybe consider a later special town meeting for the ordinance and for the money.
Yeah, we're starting the model of, a town meeting a quarter, I think, right?
Not that I'm opposed, but leaving the $20,000
Yeah, no, we would
in
take
there
it
for
out.
now doesn't make sense if you're not ready with the whole process.
So they just go back to our designated fund.
We're just not gonna appropriate it. We won't raise it for taxes, so
So,
it comes off the.
Yeah, that's a decision that I would need collectively.
Yeah.
To have input from you as a select board is. If you all agree on this decision and if that $20,000 is being pulled, then the budget. As it's being proposed right now would be $20,000 less.
Yeah, we should.
Or whether you wanna keep it in, so that is what I need to know by the end of this evening.
But you were saying the attorney felt it'd be better to.
His
Not allocate
recommendation
those
was
funds.
doing, his recommendation was doing it once, to get the ordinance in line and then have a meeting. And then have the first article be the adoption of the ordinance. If that gets adopted, then ask for the money appropriation. If that ordinance doesn't get adopted, then there's no point in asking for the money appropriation. That's kind of how he was looking versus doing it the backwards way of asking for the money, having very specific language. And then not being able to touch those funds until the future date and just do it at once. So that was his recommendation.
Well, I understand and appreciate that, but sometimes I like the idea of poking the bear. I think in a year when we're looking at a tax increase, it sends a message that this will be some relief that will be coming. There were things that haven't been worked out yet, but I remember in talking with Ben when he was doing the research for this, he said, Eliza, there are people eligible in this town for some of these state programs that don't know about them, that aren't taking advantage of these programs, especially when it comes to veterans, and there was another one having to do with blindness. There was a third category, so I think that part of doing this gets it in the public conversation, and I would hope that people would take better advantage first of what's available at the state level and the understanding that we as a select board are really hearing the need for tax relief, and this is one way. So yeah, I have a bunch of questions. Among them is if the tax assessor is making that decision, what other people are in on that? How do we have some double checks? These are questions that need to be addressed to make sure this is the right kind of program that is going to be sustainable and fair, but doing it at the time of a tax increase is, I think, a positive message to our community.
I don't disagree, but I think it's more likely to fail. If we go forward, I'm just thinking about the success of the program. I predict if we go forward to allocate 20,000 at town meeting without an ordinance and the parameters of the program, it will fail. I would probably vote against it, and I think some other people in this room would vote against it, because I think, you know, that to me, it's not responsible. I think we could inform the public, first of all, we can inform the public about all the programs that are available to them, step one. And if people aren't availing themselves of those, that would be the first step. The next step would be to say, we are in the process of developing this program, we want your input, and we hope to have it in place by whenever, you know, it might be by next spring. So that's my opinion. I'm concerned that if we just put money in the budget, there is no ordinance. And I will tell you, they spent 2 hours debating this with an ordinance in the town of Alton last week. So it's controversial for some people who do not feel like they should pay. There will be people in the community who may not feel like they want to allocate, you know, our tax dollars to subsidize, as they would call it, somebody else. So that's my opinion. I'm just, you know.
Do we need a motion to?
Well, we don't really.
You can't do motions, this is just a workshop. One quick point that I wanna make is, I do wanna give Ben Pagula a lot of credit. He
Yeah.
has put a lot of time and effort into this, and with having participated with the finance committee meetings, he has explained this program, and as a result of the work he has done, we do have a section on the town website where we have put, you know, the tax fair, just any resources that are available. There are direct links to all of that, and so, whether it's kind of creep into town meeting or whatever, we could send out, whether it's in the notice or a text message, you know, we can distribute that information more to folks so they can apply for some of the, credits that they might be, you know, available for, that they don't know about, so.
So my suggestion would be we could put it in the mailing about the budget, you know, what he's done.
Right.
And, you know, sort of, even this model description could be up on the website for people to look at. And then, at the budget meeting and the public meeting on May 13th, we could devote some time to a discussion of this, you know, just an introduction to this program, directing people to the other resources. I think, you know, my goal is that it's successful. That's really my goal. And I think Ben has done a lot of work, and I think we should give him credit in front of the community for that. But I do think the rent part, it's controversial just on the board, so I think that could be in the community. And I think, you know, most people are familiar with the programs that are age specific, targeted towards older elderly taxpayers. So if we diverge from that, I think we really have to have a pretty solid, you know, presentation to support it. So
what if, Vika, what do you need from us then tonight? That relates to that
The
20,000.
three of you agree that you want me to remove the $20,000?
but it's not a vote.
Well, no, but I would like to make sure that at least three of you agree that it needs to be removed, so it's.
Or it sounds like what you said, that it's kind of irresponsible to have it in there before it's discussed with the town. Is that?
I think it'd just be more successful if we do it as a one fell swoop.
Yeah.
I don't know that we necessarily have to wait till, you know, the next year's town meeting. We are gonna have, I think, at least one other special town meeting.
Yeah, so that,
So it could be potentially done sooner. I think people underestimate. I'm only saying this because we have land use ordinances that have been, you know, it's been 2 years, so people underestimate the timeline. I'd say it's at least 6 months from today to when you could probably really get all the public input, get the ordinance finalized, publicize it, blah, blah, blah. So that's the kind of timeline you need to go, maybe 4 months. But I do think, and I'm also just listening to Ben, I think sort of allocating money that we don't have approval to use feels a little odd.
Okay,
She's acquiescing. We're not trying to beat you down.
No, I understand that and I appreciate that. I think that being able to get the message out is important. So we'll
And
find ways, but you're absolutely right. This, I think, has a lot of support here on the
oh, I
board
agree.
and in the community and making sure that it's done in that transparent way. But so now I'll just ask one question. If we're not having it in the budget and we are having a town meeting in 6 months, where's that money coming?
Undesignated fund. Well, there's two ways. We could raise taxes, as Vika just said. But that's complicated.
Yeah.
So the more likely source in this case would be a one-time allocation violating the finance committee's recommendation at our next meeting.
It's your policy.
Right.
You want your wallet.
So I would be okay with that, but that's where it probably come from.
All right. Right, but let's not let this take more time.
Yeah.
But I also think trying to get it done in the summer, not a productive time.
Whatever people, I'm not tied to that. I
Okay.
just think,
We've got enough happening in the summer without adding this wrinkle.
right, and I can't predict how the taxpayers, I think if it was sort of a standard program, I'm gonna say, where it's elderly taxpayers, blah, 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 it's the same as all our surrounding towns, it would fly right in there. I think if it's gonna be somewhat of a different program, then I'm not sure how. people
Remember the
feel.
discussion town meeting generated the first year, there was the ask for $10,000 for Kids
Yeah.
Place. It was a lengthy discussion and it took some serious discussion to support a $10,000 contribution for daycare.
I do remember
This,
that.
I think, is,
Okay.
And I think,
could
let's
have a
let's vote
similar
this.
discussion.
I think giving Ben an opportunity to present it at the budget hearing and then put some, information in a mailing. Makes people understand, and then we can put this up on the website so they can, on the finance committee's page and people can read it and,
I'm not a fan of surveys, but this might be an area where if you're trying to collect information from a variety group of taxpayers where you could, Eliza, offer up a survey.
I love that.
all right, so that's decided. So, and just to clarify for everybody, because I think we just talked about this before the meeting. So at our next select board meeting, which is Wednesday,
Gee,
we will first, so Vika will finalize the budget, take out this 20,000, make sure all the capital things are in the right place. Probably provide a recalculated draft. It will be slightly different, but basically the same tax calculation, and that can go in the packet. The other thing that I feel, the public should have an opportunity to see the final budget. At the next meeting we have in a week, we would vote on it and sort of endorse or approve the final budget. But also if the public has some comments or questions, that would be a much better time than town meeting. So, it should be available to the public in its final form so that they can ask questions and see it, or in between now and the meeting.
What I would encourage the board and the finance committee and anybody else is to spread the word for that May 13th. There'll be a joint school board, finance and select board budget presentation with both the school board and the select board having finalized their budget. Opportunity for people to raise their concerns, ask questions, clarify information. That's the opportunity where we really want people to show up. There have been years, the school board has in the past put together a PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
I showed up, I put the Zoom on, we had the PowerPoints ready, not a single person showed up. And then at the town meeting, there were very clear outspoken people against the school budget. So this particular joint meeting is something that has kind of started to be more of a involved process, part of the budget process. And that's really an opportunity to try to encourage those people to show up and raise those questions and ask. So definitely your conversations on the back of the boat or wherever, try to remind folks that that's an important date for them to come and attend.
So thinking out loud, I think we should target the end of the month to have kind of a written mailing, a draft, so the board can approve it or review it, and the finance committee the same, mutually review it. So have it done by the end of the month, then we could mail it out in, prior to the budget meeting on the 13th. That would give, and believe me, that might bring people out of the woodwork when we say we have an estimated tax increase of 7.8%. I think it's better to be upfront, put it on the page. People can come to that meeting if they have questions, and then it's our job to kind of answer the questions. So that would be kind of and I think it's gonna be important. So as you were talking about outreach, this is the outreach. It's gonna be this mailing. So I think you really need to review it and, make sure it's acceptable. So.
That was exactly my point I was gonna make here, so thank you for making that. And please make sure that Ben understands, in my opinion, that you're not turning down his recommendation. You're postponing it so that it's complete when it's presented.
Yep. So the finance committee, you guys feel like you know what you want to put together? Do you need any more guidance on that? Yeah,
No, I don't think so.
and I think we haven't done a lot of towns do an annual report, include the warrant in there, mail it out to everybody. We haven't been doing that, but this will be like a budget report, which will include the finance committee and the town and the schools. I gotta remember. So we will have to ask the school to put something together on that.
And I guess I like the idea of having all of us have very similar talking points about explaining why things are happening, why this budget is increasing like this, and how it benefits in ways that nobody can see. So I guess I would like to be able to have a sheet we call the back of the boat.
Yeah, we can do that. I think, personally, not being overly anxious about sort of being confident and sort of being honest about why it is what it is, but also not being apologetic. I do think we gotta expect some people aren't gonna be happy.
Right.
Well, sure.
And so I think it's just whether it's gonna be the majority. And also, if at the May 13th meeting, we have an uproar, then we better go back to the drawing board. I mean, that's the reality.
But I think that some of that can be mitigated by having people understand at least a portion of what I'm catching on to here. And I think that can make if they're not.
But I would say one thing to be careful about is, as a select board, we operate as a unit. And when we do a budget presentation, we're doing that collectively with the finance committee. And so I think we want to be careful. We can talk to anybody individually, but we need to, it's difficult to maintain the same message when we're all individually.
Right, that's why having
Cheat sheet.
having a cheat sheet.
Okay, well, you're elected. Go ahead, put it together.
Well, I think we're all kind
Yeah.
of, because I think probably all of us in our own ways are trying to grapple with the understanding. And getting it into a language that, is the, non-financial person's
The elevator speech.
the basic person's understanding.
That's.
Chip said the elevator speech, so I think that's.
Yeah, no, we're designing elevators here.
I think you already know this, but I would also be careful, in my opinion, voicing a mill rate and a percentage increase too vocally, because it could have some adjustment to it
Right,
when the total value is set.
yeah, so we should talk in sort of ranges for now.
Anticipated tax
20,000.
increase, yeah.
Okay. I think, is there anything else you guys wanna talk about?
I
Nope,
don't think so.
okay. I think we appreciate all the work you've done, and we would, I don't know where we'd be on the capital without that, but I think the next step then is, so next week the finance committee's bringing a policy to the the school committee, us, select board. I'm wondering, before we leave tonight, the other item was the school committee's warrant article that gives them tremendous latitude. I just, you know, it would be helpful if the finance committee, one of the things on your list of things to do was to review that and sort of have a recommendation.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I talked to Jeff about that after the meeting and I said, I think it's just likely it was a typo as anything else. And he said, oh, I don't think it was. a big
No,
deal."
it wasn't a typo.
I
No,
thought I missed what you.
I spoke to Aaron recently about it when we were connecting on the timeline of when I needed the school warrant articles to incorporate into town, so then we can get it to the select board. And he said that his understanding that that language was incorporated around COVID to provide the flexibility, and that they are proposing that that language is gonna be changed back to what it used to be historical, in line for this town meeting.
well, and I guess he didn't answer that question when we had our joint meeting. He was a little vague. And so I'm just asking if, sort of to reinforce that, if the finance committee has a thought, you know, a position or recommendation on that. The state statute recommends 5%, but what I understand from the town attorney is if the, you know, town meeting votes to override that, we can, and that's what we've been doing.
Right.
And I think it wasn't a typo, it's been intentional that that article's been in there in the form that it's in. But I just think it's a bad policy, and it would, I hope that the school committee removes it, but we, you know, we don't control them, and it would at least be helpful to have sort of a read from the finance committee that we don't, that the committee doesn't support that approach, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I communicated that with Jeff all the way, and Aaron and I talked about it a long time ago. I'll.
Yeah.
Give him a call.
So it's just a matter of removing the
Removing
warrant
that.
article.
Well, the warrant article allows them to have full flexibility throughout the budget. Normally, it's what the state statute recommends is 5%.
Which that one time they had that back, some years ago, had
Yeah, I
the
think
state
Eric,
recommended.
he thinks it came from COVID, right?
Yeah, so I'm just I pulled out the email exchange, that I had with him this morning, and the last email exchange, or the last email, which I haven't seen. What he says is, we'll have warrant article for these referencing to, you know, other warrant articles. In addition to the standard ones, the school committee also approved to discontinue the budget transfer warrant article that has been there the past few years.
Right, so then we don't need any.
Discontinue, but don't they need some flexibility like the
Yes, so
select
there,
board has the 10%? rule.
it's, yeah, I think he mentioned in the email, it's
Okay.
9%, under 9%.
Okay.
So that will
So-
fall right in line with what the select board
Okay.
has.
So I didn't realize he had already gone that far. So that's good.
And are we talking about reorganizing the categories?
Are you referring to the reserve account?
We're not gonna do that for this town meeting. The
Thank you.
decision was to do it. It's gonna need a little more work.
Thank you.
So the next meeting, I also wanted to alert people that at the next meeting, which is Wednesday, we've had a community member ask us to discuss video surveillance. And so that's back on the agenda. And so I do think we need to, you know, we need to allow some time for that discussion. And I did ask Vika to sort of do a little research to see. I presume somebody like Maine Municipal has some guidance on video surveillance or what other towns do.
We met talking about different things, but I pulled up two different. So yours, Maine, and then the town of Hamden, I pulled up their policies. Pretty clear, I also looked at the state regs. The state regs basically say, other than areas where they expect privacy, like bathrooms or showers. And it's not private property. So on town property, we have every right to do the surveillance, recommending, best practices, have it posted. Otherwise, a fair amount of latitude, and then it seemed like most of those policies I looked at, it was a 30-day retention. And then you have, obviously, we have to talk about like who has control of it, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and I think that was one of the questions, and I will say that I'll forward you the email, but I think maybe I did, but I think I forwarded you my response to that email, but that individual is opposed to any kind of video surveillance.
Right.
Also,
Well,
We
that's,
need our roads done.
no, I'm just saying, just so you're all aware.
right, well, the other things too, is I think one of the things in those policies, that made the point of it wasn't just security surveillance, but also safety.
Right.
So we were talking about, for example, down Chandler's, you know, some ladies down there had a little bit too much drink, some guys show up, things, maybe bad things could happen, you know, so there's some benefit in protecting the public. I mean, I think we have to come up with a whole rationale for why we would even do it, and I think we have to, like you've said many times, community involvement and input.
Right, so I think thinking about how we wanna respond and what the next steps would be helpful. So we're not trying to do it, you know, just in your own mind, so that we can be coherent at that meeting.
And I ran across
Just
it.
one opinion is community involvement.
Right, well, I ran across that individual on the boat too, and they, you know, I think one of the things he wants to hear is that there will be no surveillance until, at least until such time as all these other things, policies, et cetera, have been developed, and communities had a chance to speak to it.
But we have, I mean, we do have the we do have the vandalism problem that is, and I didn't know until Vika told us about Chandler's, but that's disturbing, you know?
Well, I know, I'd asked Jeff if he could like estimate what, just on signage and stuff. I just don't have heard back, like, it'd be really nice to know what our losses have been, just to have some dollar figures.
It's not a huge amount of money, but
But
it
it
is
is
a
related
safety
that
issue.
before, we had 1 year where in a week we lost $900 worth. So
Did that include the cost to?
put them back
Put it
now.
Right, so.
But I am going to kindly suggest that we
Check that out.
cut this discussion.
Oh, yeah,
So
you're right.
then it's not a perception that you're trying to take
Right.
on something that
Right,
wasn't
right.
advertised.
So that was just a heads up, so I
Yes,
think we
I'll
can
take it.
adjourn this workshop, do I have a motion, do I need a motion?